The monitor flickered once, then died, plunging the workshop into a heavy, stagnant gloom. Elias stood motionless over the workbench. Before him lay a jagged pile of twisted metal and shattered glass, the remains of his latest attempt. He gripped the welding torch, his knuckles white against the handle, his jaw locked tight. He pressed the nozzle to the seam. The connection snapped instantly. A violent shower of sparks erupted, illuminating the sharp angles of his face for a fraction of a second before fading into pitch blackness. He let go. The torch hit the floor with a sharp, metallic clatter that echoed against the concrete walls and died in the corners of the room. He did not move to retrieve it. He stared at the wreckage, his breath hitching in the quiet. The air smelled of ozone and burnt insulation. Outside, the world was invisible, leaving him trapped in this small, lightless space. He stood frozen, listening to the hum of the cooling metal. He did not look away from the debris. He waited for the heat to dissipate, his hands still shaking from the tension of the failed weld. The silence was absolute. Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a notebook. The pages were dense with red ink. He flipped to the latest entry, his thumb tracing a specific measurement before he circled it with a sharp, aggressive stroke. He grabbed a caliper, measured the gap in the assembly, and scribbled a new number in the margin. His hands trembled, but he forced them to steady as he reached for the screwdriver. He drove the tool into the bolt, turning it until the metal groaned and his palm split against the handle. He wiped the blood onto his leg and flipped the power switch. The motor whined. It sputtered, caught for a heartbeat, and then died with a final hollow click. Elias stood over the dead machine for a long, heavy beat. He did not curse. He did not shout. He walked to the window and watched the rain streak against the glass, blurring the world outside into gray smears. He turned back, his face set in a hard, neutral line. He began to clear the debris, sweeping the shattered components into a pile. He started the assembly from scratch. The first gray light of dawn crept through the window, casting long, sharp shadows across the workshop floor. Elias remained hunched over the workbench, his posture rigid. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the strain of a night spent in total focus. He held a soldering iron, the tip glowing dull red as he fused a tiny circuit board. His palm, slick with dried blood, gripped the edge of the table to steady his shaking fingers. He ignored the stinging pain. He finished the final connection, his breath shallow and controlled. He reached for the test lead and pressed it against the terminal. A faint blue light pulsed once, illuminating his face with a ghostly, flickering glow. He held his breath, waiting for the hum, waiting for the stability. The light vanished. The workshop returned to the dim, cold gray of early morning. He did not sigh. He did not lean back. He stared at the dead circuit, his jaw set, his mind already calculating. He reached for the frequency dial. Elias gripped the frequency dial. He turned it a fraction of a millimeter, his fingers moving with a rhythmic, mechanical precision that ignored the tremor in his hands. He took a breath, held it, and flipped the switch. For a second, there was only the sound of his own heartbeat. Then, the machine groaned. It vibrated against the workbench, the metal frame shuddering as if it might tear itself apart. Elias did not flinch. He watched the core, his eyes locked on the internal wiring. The vibration smoothed out, shifting into a steady, low-frequency drone that rattled the tools on the wall. He reached for a heavy steel weight and placed it onto the platform. The machine held. It lifted the weight, rotating it in a perfect, frictionless circle. Elias stepped back, his chest heaving with every intake of air. The blue light flared, growing from a pulse into a constant, brilliant glow that flooded every corner of the workshop. It reflected in his eyes, washing away the exhaustion of the night. The shadows on the floor vanished, replaced by the intense, steady radiance of his creation. He stood perfectly still, watching the weight rotate, the hum of the machine filling the silence of the room. He had done it. He let out a long, slow exhale, his hands finally dropping to his sides. Elias reached for his notebook, the pages worn and stained from his long night. He found the final error, the one that had stalled him for hours, and drew a thick, decisive line through it. The ink looked black against the red scribbles. He set the pen down. He did not look back at the machine. He left the tools scattered across the workbench, Their purpose served. He walked toward the workshop door, his boots heavy against the concrete. The air felt different as he reached for the handle. He pulled the door open. A rush of cool, morning air hit his face, sharp and clean. He stepped over the threshold, leaving the blue glow behind. The sunlight was bright, blinding after the darkness of the room, but he did not squint. He walked forward, his pace steady.